Oh, we got where to start. What's up, guys? We're live. Welcome back, Sam. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited for this one. I feel like a little nervous about it, but in a good way. It's a big topic.
Yeah, I mean, this one is fun to think about. For some people out there, a little precautionary warning that if you are sensitive to anything religious based, this will be a religious kind of based episode. So just keep that in mind. In particular, if you're wondering, we're going to be diving into the topic of something called digital deities, or that's how we're going to frame it today. And essentially what that means is we're going to look at AI and some other technologies as well, but pretty much AI, AGI, augmented general intelligence, and how that might affect religions in both a positive and negative light. We need to ask ourselves, I think, now here heading into 2025 with LLMs being a reality and AI being as good as it is and the direction it continues to go in, will we end up worshiping our actual creations? Could AI become reminiscent of gods or God itself or himself or herself? What impact might that have on society, existing religions? How might it shape our spirituality, our belief systems in both profoundly positive and maybe even negative ways? How will the church itself adopt technologies like AI and address these things as well? So we're going to kind of dive into that today. In particular, the big focus will be on digital deities. Sam, do you want to add a little bit of the pre-context to that as well?
Yeah, before I jump into 10 years, 100,000 years of history. So really where this concept came from is, in recent, I don't know if I want to call it news, but happenings in the world. There are a few incidents. One example, which we call AI Jesus, there was a church in Switzerland that was able to basically partner with I think an institute of science and technology, so a university, to develop a large language model or an AI agent trained on the teachings of the Bible. And they were able to render a holographic version of Jesus. I feel like uncomfortable even reporting this. It was so creepy.
Oh boy.
And then ended up putting the hologram of this AI agent into a confessional. So this definitely has had a lot of reporting, discourse, discussion around the concept, the ethics, the efficacy of it. And that really was the inspiration here. I mean, there's a lot going on in terms of the relationship of technology to religions, organized religions, religious belief systems, spiritual belief systems, etc. But this is sort of where, when we were talking about what we wanted to discuss this
Deus
week.
in Machina, Switch Church installs AI-powered Jesus. Wow.
Yeah, so
what a leap.
Me being myself, I immediately find out it's like a fine-tuned model of ChatGPT, and so I start trying to build this myself and reverse engineer it, which was an interesting experience for me. I think I need to go to confession myself after that. I'm sorry, but it brought up for me a lot of questions beyond just getting into the tech of it, of, like which version of the Bible was it trained on? Was it all of them? Was it learning based on the conversations or confessions that it interacted, with 900 people, I believe. So yeah, this was really the framing for how are we thinking about religion and digital deities, digital belief systems, and digital worship.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like the last episode we did when we were talking about, I think it was a couple of episodes back actually, but the AI hologram on Tupac, and when they used him at, was it Coachella? Tupac?
2012 Coachella. Yeah. Yeah, this is the
Yeah,
next time you're gonna have like Jesus come resurrection 2.0.
yeah,
Uh
these are, potentially scary things. I mean, given the fact that AI already has a short history of, dealing with implicit bias, not necessarily being completely correct, having various different inputs, varying depending on which model is being utilized, presents, some deeply, I'd say, large concerns, when it's used in a religious context like this, because we're talking about Jesus, the man himself. Like, I don't know if we want to see this or not. I'm sure that the church was probably trying to do this in like a good sense. I think they were trying probably to do something just innovative, but at the same time, it just raises so many questions. Like, is this right to do? What is it? Is it talking to people? Like, do you know if it like could speak or anything? Like, was this like a video or was it?
it did. Yeah, so they
It
use a
did? Oh
combination of
boy.
technology. It was basically how I built the latest version of Samrad AI. That's why I was so easily able to replicate it. It was a combination of, I think they used HeyGen for the video, which I promise I'm a real person here. This isn't my clone. This is just where people normally see her. But yeah, and combined it with probably I think it was one of the chat GPT models and then some sort of voice model connected through their APIs. It had the critique of it from the tech publications were like, there was a lag. It was slow, the response. Of course there'd be a lag because it was taking time to do, speech to text, text to speech, etc., and then put it into the video. But I was like, that was your critique? The critique wasn't like this, should we have done this or not? But I think with whether you call it art or experimentation or science or things that push boundaries in society and culture, of course, they will make us uncomfortable. That's sort of the point. I myself might have framed this more as art as opposed to like science or technology they're just incorporating into the church. But nonetheless, I think, if we go through a bit of history, not a massive, like the history of all of religion, every religion, and every technology. But, there have been moments in time from the beginning where new technologies challenged belief systems, and, how they were shared amongst people or democratized or the perspectives around that, all the way down to the invention of writing, right? Or shifting belief systems from oral tradition, so shared through story and from person to person, to then put on tablets or papyrus on paper and ultimately shared
Was it
amongst people.
papyrus? I've always called it papyrus.
Papyrus. I don't know. How do you pronounce it?
I think it's papyrus. I'm probably saying it
Papyrus.
wrong. But
Remember that
papyrus
font?
sounded right.
That was the most ridiculous font. That and Comic Sans. I don't know if they still exist anymore, but this was old Microsoft
I think it probably
fonts.
does. I'd have to look it up.
Google it now. But yeah, where are we? We're in history. We've got the written scriptures and any of the earliest technologies, which is again writing on either stone or paper tablets, printing press, obviously, which is much later, which also ushered in kind of a number of revolutions, including the Reformation, the Gutenberg press. One of the first, at least, books that was mass produced was the Bible, of course, and this was this shift between basically, I think I'd call this the age of vernacular communication. This is my academic research of basically shifting to empower people to interpret the text as opposed to the church, right? The Vatican, and it being written in Latin as opposed to the vernacular, so common language of people, which now put interpretation, at least of these texts, into the hands of the people.
Yeah, and just to touch on, like, being able to reproduce the Bible at a rate like that also had a massive impact on, how the text was translated over time into various different versions, into different languages for different cultures. And then, every time you reproduce something, it's like a game of telephone. You don't necessarily know if it's 100% correct. And there's been a lot of things that have changed from older past versions of the Bible to new modern versions of the Bible as interpretations have come down over time. So one example of technology having a massive impact on religion religion itself, and going from, being part of like one area, one culture, one part of the world, one dialect, to being consumed by many different people, but also being interpreted for those different people across the world. So that was definitely a massive technological implication for religion.
Yeah, and obviously, this is very Judeo-Christian centric perspective as well when we're talking about the history of the Bible and the written text of the Bible. I think there were similar journeys across many of the other religions as well, in terms of not having a lot of historical or written texts or early texts. Like I think I've done a lot of research, particularly Buddhism, Buddhist texts, and early Hinduism and things like this. There aren't even really authors. It's kind of like we found these texts and they've become cornerstones of a belief system or a religion, or there are parables that were documented similarly to maybe the New Testament. But again, I think there were similar experiences, right, where throughout the world in these religions, there was a point in time where we shifted from oral tradition to some sort of written tradition. There wasn't a really, great system of record of who these people are or were writing it, or what were their perspectives. And then, of course, as you said, we start printing different versions of everything.
Yeah, and people largely also were, I think, putting their experiences onto paper too, and trying to understand the best at their time certain things happening in the world. Some things are probably a little exaggerated that you see in religious texts, but other things, can seem very powerful and are very powerful for a lot of people in different religions. But everything from the Chinese talking about mythical beasts and ancient dragons, to the Greeks talking about half people, half horses, half this, half that, to chariots in the sky and great celestial battles, to gods coming down to earth and interacting with people. It goes beyond just Christianity and Catholicism and Islam and Hinduism. Like, there's a lot of religions around the world people probably aren't fully aware of, but text-based recording has been, I think, a huge important part in kind of trying to translate what people understood back then as well, and has changed, I think, probably, what they believed then and what's that's interpreted into now.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about religions, I guess even the pagan, of course, polytheistic, so meaning multiple gods or deities, but some of the early kind of Norse religions as well that were more connected to, I'd say, nature and collective consciousness. And it's something we could, or at least the perception or belief in some sort of collective consciousness that is communicated through nature. And, there's some anecdotes even with some of the ritual behaviors of drumming. And this is something that, using drums as being a way to communicate through mycelial or like mushroom networks in the forest. And it's somehow being able, like, almost like an avatar type thing, like tree of knowledge, share long wave communication into the forest. And this is quite scientific, actually, if we reinterpret it in the modern era and we get to kind of the present. So I'm jumping ahead of myself, but it's something that maybe we compare towards the end as we're thinking about, will AI usher in an era of collective awareness or collective consciousness beyond what we have now with just the internet?
Yeah, and another way to, think about it potentially, and I think we'll get into it more, but AI could be just another way to, experience it. Back then, playing music, banging on a drum or having a little guitar or, having that sense of community, that rhythm going through you. Sometimes that connects you. It happens to people today. You listen to your favorite music artist, you listen to Beyonce, might get you going in the morning. Um, but it's the same thing. Back then, people would listen to music, create music, build culture around music. So it's very connecting, and it's something I don't think they fully understood back then, but it definitely played in a lot into religion. Hymns in the Catholic Church, it goes
I
on and
mean,
on.
the Gregorian chants, so like the frequencies, I don't know, there's something there where all of the music, especially religious music or bells and everything that was tuned to certain frequencies,
Mhm.
are certainly things that we also work with now, whether they're considered healing frequencies or what have you. And it's something that we've lost, and I wouldn't say completely in modern culture, because there are still pockets of um, very traditional interpretations of organized religion in religions around the world. But I think it's easy to look past the sophistication, almost the scientific sophistication, and we've really become quite rational post Enlightenment thinking, right? Prioritize so much rationality over faith. But um, as we return to what I feel like is a time of balance, I have to let someone in. Um, Everyone's watching. Brandon will
I'll
continue. I
entertain the
have to let
people.
someone delivering something.
So I would play a song for you, but I can't play any instruments. And I would sing for you, but I can't sing. But what I can say, and just to kind of finish up this topic while Sam is gone and coming back, um, you know, music has been a huge part of religion. It's been a really important part in terms of, I think, people connecting with a higher power, a higher being, and creating that, I don't know how to say, but that connection, that feeling, like that spirituality, like in religion, spirituality is incredibly important, and I think with music, it really helps with that connection part. Like when I was in middle school, I went to a Christian middle school, and we had chapel every single Wednesday. And every single Wednesday, they'd have this like Christian rock band. They would come in and they'd sing like 6 or 7 different songs, and it was a lot of fun. But you could definitely feel the energy in the air. Like this is a really specific example, but a good one to kind of explain music and religion, how they fit so well together. But you can feel the energy in the air and communal, um, I think, value that, kind of flows out of that. And I think, back then, when you don't really have anything else that kind of like generates that energy, and our minds operate on a frequency, our brain does. So, there's a lot of studies done on music and how music at certain frequencies elicit certain responses from the brain too. It can be really um, instrumental in who connects you to religion. Same thing, you might happen in AI in a different way. It's all experiential. You use music in an experiential way to connect to religion. Maybe we'll use AI in a different experiential way to connect to religion, like with that Swiss church. Like maybe creating AI Jesus would help some people actually connect more with the idea of Jesus, maybe come to Jesus a bit more. Maybe it's easier for them to put a face the religion itself, which has been really hard to do for a long time. Obviously there's a lot of potential negative consequences to that, but if we're talking just in the realm of creating experiences through technology, that could be potentially a good area.
It's a tough one, right? This is the debate from whatever technology we're talking about. If we're talking about, did written scripture or printed books bring more people to their faith or more division? Did radio and television, let's say evangelism and mass communication, bring more people or more division? Did the apps and platforms and internet and the rise of cults and all sorts of prophets, whether you call them false or not, there's certainly an abundance of ideas and prophets, you know, I like your perspective on music. Music is actually how I communicate to most things, including what feels like God or my faith. And it's something that, you know, if you're coming from like a very rigid perspective, and also like for me, I grew up in the Catholic church, which didn't have very, it was very like not fun music. It was no music. But I think, you know, I like would be dancing and raving, not like at a rave, drug fueled rave, just moving and feeling connected. And when I was young, it was something that to me felt almost like a religious experience of connection to all that is. And, you know, you could look at that and be like, that's terrible. And, you know, the work of the devil, satanic type stuff. And yes or no, because it could have been exactly the thing that brought me on a journey to understanding where I was going or what that faith was. So I try to, you know, for me, who am I to judge what is someone's journey or path to their set of belief systems? And while this AI Jesus definitely brought stuff up for me, I was immediately like, what the heck? You know, my response to any use of AI like this is like, heck no. Like, no way, no. But you know, your perspective is, it makes sense. It could be something that for people who are not normally let's say religious or even spiritual, they come across this and kind of play around, and maybe they're coming from a technological perspective or again a very rational perspective, and the discourse with this this agent, this AI agent, can open their minds in new ways. I've seen a lot of people also posting, let's say on social media platforms, their experiences, of course, developing chatbots and working with them, of course, as like mental health therapists, which again, I have questions around the safety of that, you know, or friendship or romantic interests, or helping them navigate some sort of life change or spiritual set of questioning around the nature of their belief system. You know, it is interesting. I think what people will do with any new technology, and this is just my personal opinion, but we have these very deep existential questions as human beings, like who are we? Why are we here? What's our purpose? What happens when we're not here? Like when we die, right? That's something, and there's kind of a fundamental, for a lot of people, fear around that transition. And of course, there's a new technology. What people will do is very human things of contemplate the nature of existence or be like super hedonistic and sexualized, which also happens with new technologies. It's usually the first use case. I don't want to be vulgar, but it's like anytime something is invented, and you find all sorts of unique uses. But
slogan of the 21st century should be what people do.
yeah.
Oh boy. Is that your groceries? Bear with us, people. Sam is getting a delivery.
Hi, everyone. I'm having a day today. I need to let people in that are quite late, but you can all join in on my life's endeavors.
We need a guest speaker on the podcast. Why don't you bring him on, answer a question real quick?
I already talk to strangers all day long and be like, I don't want to inundate a delivery person with existential questions, but yeah.
So what's the next thing on our list here? You know, we've covered a little bit of historical background on different technologies that have had a fairly profound impact on religion, you know, going back from ancient times to medieval times, you know, all the way to modern times. Obviously, technology like the radio and television have had massive impacts on distribution of religion and spreading it to more people. Same thing with the internet, of course. A lot of things have spawned out of the internet, both good and bad. I think we'll talk about some of that in a few. And then obviously AI. But I kind of want to highlight some of the both the good and the bad here in modern times with AI in particular, with religion. I think it'll be good to kind of do a little bit of back and forth. But it's something that I think will really depend. It kind of reminds me of the sarcopods a little bit. It's like something that's very, like we talked on the last episode, ethically writing a boundary that for some people might be, the solution that they want, but for many other people, it might be like, it counteracts everything and you believe. Like having AI Jesus, for some people that could be a really good gateway tool into religion for the first time in a modern era. We have to remember we do live in a modern era, and people grow up with different types of technology and belief systems. At the same time, it could be used with malintent. It could be used in bad ways. It could be used to influence people in negative ways. And hopefully the AI doesn't come alive itself, or that just created additional issues with AI Jesus. I think, I think it's just going to create a lot of confusion for people, because this is something that you don't necessarily want, I think, to bring to life so quickly and so hastily. So we are talking about God. We are talking about Jesus. And for people, that's a very powerful and personal thing. And so AI is going to have, various different impacts. It could be used to preserve and analyze ancient religious texts and artifacts over time so that, we don't lose sight of that stuff. Actually helping to safeguard a lot of cultural heritage. Actually, I'm going to pull up a link to this real quick. And there's different religions too that also kind of believe this stuff. And I'll contrast this. Let's see, did I pull it up? There we go. So the Church for Latter-day Saints is actually on the plus side of this, saying that AI could be used, for good, conceding that, others maybe will be much more against it than they need to be. There's, a lot of avenues here where AI could be potentially used to help facilitate, the word for certain religious texts and spreading it to a larger group of people. Like with Church of Latter-day Saints, it's a lot smaller community than maybe Catholicism or Islam or Hinduism, like some of the bigger religions out there. It could be good if they want to actually spread a bit more some of their guiding principles, some of the things that they believe, their spiritual connections, creating more transparency, more accountability within their religious communities. Like there's potential benefits there that I think some churches will be more eager to explore than others. And then I will try to find the one on the Pope that I had, but other religions might be very much against it. There was a thing that happened with Pope Francis where someone made like a AI deep fake of him and he saw it. I think that affected his opinion of, AI and its role with religion, and that he stated that there needed to be a little bit more caution in how it's used and how it might actually detrimentally affect religion. So, while we're exploring these topics and what it could be used for and its impact on God and religion, the church, all these different churches and religions themselves are also kind of weighing in on, is this a technology we should embrace? Is this a technology that we should have a bit more skepticism for? And you'll see some of them leverage them and create AI Jesus, and you'll see some of them say, we need to take a step back.
I don't want to say if you can't beat them, join them. It's not the right, but it's sort of my opinion with AI adoption or tech adoption in general across any institution or any organization or any individual. it's happening, right? A lot of my job is to, like, just because I share or we share what we're seeing and what is happening, that doesn't necessarily mean I personally agree with it or think that it should, but here we are. And if every other institution is taking part in shaping, the, the training data, the language models, etc., and those are strictly, we have very excited. Are those dogs? What is that? I'm like hearing the very exciting
There's various
background.
noises in the background.
So
Apologies.
my right, like if the only players in this game right now are either corporate institutions or individuals that are competing to shape these models and the training data, then I would say that the religious institutions should participate in shaping this, because if they don't, then they'll get left behind, and perhaps some of these perspectives don't make it in to the models or whatever ones win. And I've been a long advocate of team human, in the sense that we also need people who to shape the training data, who are training or sharing things like poetry or empathy or emotion or things like this. So from that perspective, maybe it still makes me uncomfortable, in the sense that it, there's a lot of potential for misuse and manipulation. And, I'm thinking of the Bible. In the beginning, there was the word. Like there is a word. That word, I don't think, is it, now you're introducing another word. We already have so many other people's interpretations of that word. Do people then get confused of what they're reading, or who or what they're communicating with, and understanding that the AI, the system, is yet another intermediary that perhaps is not sanctioned or by their particular organized religion, right? And what does that mean? Who created it? Because it's human beings that are shaping this, and is it really a human's role to do that? So a lot of very provocative questions. I think the most provocative question is when we cross a threshold of artificial general intelligence or art super intelligence that would be that would surpass the collective human intelligence. Does that then emerge as not only a new consciousness, but something that we perceive as a deity, right? A god different from, let's say, the Christian God, the God, or maybe there are multiple deities, digital deities, that are polytheistic, and there's there's Claude, the demigod, and there's open Chat GPT, the demigod, more like a Greek or Roman.
I've seen a lot on AGI, artificial general intelligence. Do you want to kind of explain it a little bit, Sam? You're probably better equipped to, how's it different than, the Chat GPTs, the Claudes, the Geminis of today that we see. Like, this is much more like trying to create something that's alive, right? Like something that's, equivalent to a human.
Yeah, I mean, the current, someone asked me this question recently, and this is again just my opinion, is that a large language model, which is basically using the statistical probability of the next word in a sentence trained on vast amounts of human data, that was publicly available on mostly internet sources. So anything from the past 20, 30 years we've done on social networks, written in books, film, etc., to predict the next logical occurrence of something happening. Now, the idea of emergence, basically a system being able to come up with something new that is not based on some form of autocomplete or prediction, is a different concept. And the question that I was asked is, do you think of AGI, artificial general intelligence, so surpassing human intellect and reasoning, will happen or emerge out of an LLM a predictive model. I said no. I think it's coming out of something else, but what that is, not entirely sure. And what we have to be mindful that most of the data that's going into what we're working with now and the public has their hands on, whether we're talking about image or video generation, text or autocomplete, right? Or AI Jesus, which is basically trained on the text of the Bible, Old and New Testament. And then you might say, what does this mean? What happens after I die, AI Jesus? And it's going to take that text, but also the likelihood of, probably the average of responses that would be most likely to occur based on the text and collective human training data. A super intelligence or something that transcends that would be forming its own thoughts in a way that we believe that we can. I think it would need more data beyond just cognitive or intellectual rational data. I think there's a lot more that goes into, let's say, human consciousness than that, whether that's our endocrine, like our neurochemical data, which people are tracking now, or our biometrics, our eye movements, or how do you know when you're feeling something? When like they're energetic data. So I think we'll get there. I'm very protective when I see the different ways that different data sets are being collected, but really this is this hypothetical scenario where I don't even a synthetic intelligence, something that is not human in origin, surpasses I guess right now the definition is the cognitive ability of a human, which is more the IQ, you're thinking. I think at least that's my understanding. I might be misspeaking. I would think there needs to be another definition, which is like.
Yeah, I think the best definition that I ever really come across is probably from Ray Kurzweil, and it's probably in his book, How to Create a Mind, which came out not too long after he wrote The Singularity.
Yeah.
And I mean, geez, that guy was really spot on. I remember reading that, like almost 10 years ago at this point. And it seems very true, everything that has happened so far. And we're not even in 2045 yet, which is supposedly when the singularity is supposed to happen. And we're supposed to surpass human intelligence, however you want to measure that, human consciousness, or at least be able to replicate it. AGI maybe will be the thing that replicates it. It's just fascinating because AI today is already starting to turn into this black box where we know data is going in and we know answers are coming out, but we're starting to lose complete understanding of what's happening in that middle process. And it's just because computers are getting faster and faster and smarter, and there's so many different things that tie into it now. You got to wonder if AI is, obviously there's a consciousness aspect that we're exploring, but, is that godlike in some ways?
So, I do, Ray Kurzweil, of course, the person on this in this moment of the singularity, right? This hypothetical moment where we converge and it actually surpasses us. I've had my journey through the Silicon Valley pop futurists, in my career and being one of them until I, left after the past decade. I don't want to criticize it, but I think that anytime that there is a new exciting technology, and this has been the kind of the one in the zeitgeist over the past 2 years, there are a lot of like over promising of what it can do. And how far along we are, which we are, we don't want to ignore it and then all of a sudden be like, oops. But I'm more concerned not of, I've even seen supposed people who would refer to themselves as experts, which makes me dubious in the first place. But, claiming that they've reverse engineered or found some sort of emergent consciousness already. it may be so, but I'm more concerned about humans manipulating other humans with this technology, whether it's just a plagiarism machine or it is an emergent consciousness that is impressionable at this moment, maybe not outsmarting us quite yet. Either way, when you're talking about things like life or death, which we discussed on the last episode with, maybe the encouragement of people to make certain decisions with their life because of the availability of technology, coupled with, let's say, sociocultural political trends. We're in this, it's happening with belief systems and religion as well, and this is an area where people are extremely easily manipulated.
Mhm.
And not to say, like, I'm not the person to go in and point fingers and say false prophet, this or that. That's someone, you do that journey yourself. But yeah, I do worry about this like very super powerful tool that all of a sudden, if you're looking, you're working through your faith and something is telling you, you're listening to its guidance, whether it was an television evangelist who, we find out, has like 20 cars in a mansion and is doing
Mhm.
bad things behind the scene. It's just something that raises a bit of alarm for me. But when I have that feeling, that's also when I personally dig into it and work with the technology and become proficient with it, which is why, like, I really want to dislike this church that built the AI Jesus. But on the flip side, I'm like, okay, it's good that they are, proverbially, they're getting their hands dirty and understanding what's going on. They
Mhm.
have to.
Yeah, we live in an age of information, of abundant information. I get duped every single day. Like I woke up this morning and I was seeing a bunch of stuff that was happening in the rebellion in Syria. And, I don't know a whole lot about what's going on over there, but I saw a ton of stuff over the last few days. I thought it was right. And then I did some more research. And 10 minutes later, I was wrong. And then 10 minutes after that, I was right again. Like, it's really hard to understand sometimes what's going on in the world and what's right and there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation out there. Um, and that's difficult too when it comes to, AI and becomes to some of these things that we're talking about. I think it's an age where we need to be, and I think this is also something that plays into the benefit of humanity that AI is going to have trouble with, and that's being able to be objective and step back. Um, AI is fed information and it consumes, it interprets, and it produces, which is great if you wanted to write an essay for you or, outline your content schedule for the month. But being able to critically analyze something and have rational thought, you really have to be able to be objective. And I think in an informational age, it's much harder for AGI to do. And again, I could be wrong about this, over time, and I'm sure it'll be resolved, but it's easier for humans to step back and look at two things and make a decision. I think it is for AI to do at this current point in time. But that line is, again, getting very, very blurred. It's getting better every single day. Like 2 years ago, um, you saw ChatGPT putting 15 fingers on people when you generate an image, and now it's like perfectly seamless on most of them. A couple more years from now, you won't probably determine like if that's AI Jesus or actual Jesus, and that's what's scary.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was sorry, I was just playing with my little AI Jesus model that I made and asked the question, do you think AI is a false prophet? It said AI is a tool created by humans and does not claim to possess divine authority or spiritual insight or the ability to prophecy. Um, you know, I I'm intrigued to see what they were able to do to kind of override that, and then, or basically having some like your take on the persona, the command or prompt of Jesus, and then to go so far as to create some sort of likeness or image. Um, again, I think right now the lines are not blurred, but you can already tell like people are getting confused between what and who they're speaking to. And it's quite confusing. I don't know. I think that this is something where I call it, I don't know. It's not, I don't like to want to name anything about society, but I have this hunch and wrote about it in my book of this like mass psychosis, this question of meaning, the questioning of what is real, right? Which we're in this transition now, from the sheer abundance of information on the internet and not knowing where it comes from or what is the motivation of the narrative and what bot networks are sharing it all and why do you see it everywhere. But there's also a deeper crisis there, and this is like this crisis of consciousness or meaning, where not only are we questioning what is real from what we see or the information, but then we're seeking this very fundamental existential connection that I think a lot of as many of our institutions that have provided this structure and meaning for people are shifting. I don't want to say breaking down. I don't think it's going to completely every social institution completely shifts, but there's definitely this lack of grounding. And whenever there is a moment in history where there's a lack of grounding or some sort of power vacuum or vacuum in general, right? Like universe or nature abhors a vacuum, it's going to fill it with something. You have to almost hold it off to not. And I think what's happening or the risk of what could happen with religions, organized religions or belief systems or spirituality is that there is this vacuum and you can feel it. And some are filling that vacuum or holding the line with a resurgence towards a fundamentalist or very traditional interpretation of faith. And then there are like traditional values. And then there's this other perspective where a lot of new wacky stuff is happening, whether it's AI Jesus, whether it's new age spiritual type cults, things like twin flame ideology or things that are playing off of energetics, things that are playing, which works, right? Because as we're discovering more and more about, let's say, quantum physics, and I've always seen maybe like a connection between the new age spirituality and quantum physics, the woo-woo side, it's easy to kind of dupe people with the pseudoscience, but it's not completely pseudoscience as we're discovering more. Oh yeah, we've got twin flames.
I feel like they got more popular after the Netflix series.
Oh no, I know. And there's crazy story of some of these concepts that were actually tied into some pretty nefarious online conspiracies or groups or even like foreign adversarial countries that were tying certain ideas under the guise of spirituality, because it is
Look
so
at all
easy.
these happy twin flames. It must be
Yeah,
real, right?
so for people who don't know this is basically an ideology that there's divine masculine energy and divine feminine energy. I don't even remember now. And you have like a soulmate, basically. It's your twin flame. That's the other half of your soul. So when you're in the pre-existence phase of the cosmos, I guess a soul can get so big that it splits in half and then incarnates here on Earth, and you spend your whole life seeking this sort of divine union to become complete. I think in the case of this actual group, they had some issues where they didn't have enough men or something. They started convincing women to play the role of men for other women. It became a whole mess. And then
Here's the kicker with it. Like, it starts off like, okay, this is a believable idea for people. Like, it's not too far out there. And then, they start telling you who your twin flame is and who you're supposed to be with. And there were a lot of instances where they were pairing up women with men that were, very questionably probably wrong for them. Not just in terms of compatibility, but, how they are and their personality. Like, some people stole from other people. Some people hurt other people. Like, there were a lot of dangers to that. And I think too much emotional control as well by this group. Again, go watch the Netflix series. It's actually really good. Shout out Netflix for that.
So the crazy thing there is that it is a natural exploit of the break, I guess, of the gender wars, or the breakdown of traditional, let's say, nuclear family structures, in sort of exploiting a desire or resurgence to find this sort of balance of the polarity of masculine and feminine energy within oneself or within a partnership. And that it again, as this is an example exactly of that sort of vacuum that's formed when certain things break down, whether it's a big institution in society, whether we're talking about the financial system or organized religion, or smaller pieces of things, when they break down, and new ideologies will be presented to fill it. And some of these are completely innocent, right? They just kind of like come in. It's sort of like there's been a forest fire and we have new growth. Or there are bad actors that look to exploit and take advantage of people. The twin flame thing, I don't think that it was started from, these are very old, they pulled from a lot of belief systems across all the religions to put that together. But what did happen was that it was combined with other online movements and conspiracies like QAnon. So you're seeing a lot of twin flame, QAnon, this type of stuff, in like targeting yoga moms and spiritual, new age spiritual people who just wanted to follow things mostly on Instagram that were like, positive gratitude type thing. So with AI, and that's an example where like those posts, and this was starting in 2015, 2016, this is an older story. Even before that, where this wasn't necessarily AI Jesus, but this was definitely AI ideas and bot networks that were targeting people with a set of values and beliefs, and pulling them into this cult-like set of beliefs, and even radicalizing some of the people. Most of them not. Most of them were just kind of taken advantage of and put in some really crappy relationships. But, again, with these tools, and you have something as deep as faith or absence of faith, vulnerable people looking for an answer, looking for guidance, we will probably see the emergence of things that are beneficial, hopefully, to society, to help people on that journey and find their purpose and their passion and connections with all. But there will also be the other things that happen.
Yeah, I think the existential worry here is that if humans themselves are able to convince other humans of stuff like this, and we see cults happen all the time, from twin flames to the Manson family, like it can vary quite drastically, but humans can convince humans of all kinds of things. And usually that's, them tapping into vulnerabilities, susceptibilities, emotions, even spirituality itself, and just having a different play on it. If humans can do that, the concern is, AI might be able to do it better and more efficiently. We live in an era of bots too. Social pressure is another area of concern. You see it every day online. People use bots, unfortunately, to promote certain ideas, certain value sets, to make people seem more popular than other people. There's a huge lawsuit going on right now between Drake and Kendrick Lamar over a song he published earlier this year, claiming that he used bots to inflate his stats, which he probably did, but Drake probably did too. But it's actually something that's proven, and it's very frequent in the music industry, to jumpstart streams. And the streaming business is a whole different subject. Maybe we'll do an episode on the future of music at some point. Could be interesting. But bots have been used quite frequently in a modern age of the internet to influence people as well. You give AI power to access something like that as well. You generate a lot of social pressure. there's a lot of concerns there with certain technologies. If AI has the ability to tap into it through an API or to plug in some kind of way, you know, could they do what Twin Flames did, but like 100x bigger or more effective, accessing prior data and how things went in the past, and maybe having a similar play, but doing it in a more productive way that's less likely to fail is something AI would be able to potentially pull off. So I think susceptibility of people in general, again, if other humans can take advantage of that and do it pretty effectively, like Twin Flames, for example, or any religious cult, not picking on one or the other, I think AI is definitely a purveyor of that in the future as well. It's something that could be very predatory.
Yeah, I mean, we'll probably see. I don't make predictions, but it would be super easy to do it with this. I mean, if you consider these smaller examples, like small tests, or all over the past year, we've seen just the way that a narrative, even in the past day, I think there are two crazy things going around the internet, right? It's like every day there's some sort of new, reality TV narrative going around. And they're quite small, but complex. And I think the problem with the internet now combined with AI is that there's an abundance of information. We've got a bunch of people who think they're skilled at pattern recognition and drawing lines where they might not be, which is teetering the psychosis, right? There's like, oh my God, conspiracy is everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if the first emergence of some sort of like, it would be a hoax, right? If I were AI and I wasn't it's totally the super intelligence, but you would like lead people to believe that you have some sort of like, I've discovered it, or I have it, whether it's coming intentionally out of those companies. And it's sort of like a mechanical Turk thing. So the story of the mechanical Turk is, there's this box, we've invented this machine that can play chess better than a human, and really it was like a guy inside a chess master playing chess. So I mean,
This one, right?
Our mechanical Turk. I mean, now mechanical Turk is actually the name of something.
Is that an actual Turk?
Yeah, it's Turk man. But actually it's a system of people. Bots are mostly people still, like in warehouses. But I think, the question is, does something like lead people to believe that it has surpassed human intelligence? And for the most part, it has surpassed now a majority of intellectual intelligence, if we're talking about IQ. And so if it surpasses that and can outsmart a large group of people in some sort of way, that it has knowledge that we don't have, or disproves things from various religious backgrounds, or, it's like, I'm an alien from the 8th dimension and here's what that looks like. I think there will be a lot of examples like this, which it will probably be quite justifiable if with assuming the amount of information and the patterns that can be drawn. So it'll be more about the cognitive security of people, of having a healthy skepticism, not to just immediately believe that there's some new god, tech god. And beyond it just being an AI god, I think there's the interim step that humanity seems to be at a point where we're worshiping, we had been, right, tech founders, as sort of demigods. And I'm not here to say what to do or not do, but it's something that there's definitely a trend of thinking that we can solve or overcome human challenges or human suffering. We talked about this on the death technology episode. I mean, on one hand, it's beautiful if we strive to bring like alleviate pain and suffering. It's not something that I wish upon people, but there is a question of does it play a role in at least religion and belief systems and faith-based systems, which it seems to across many of them. So that's something where I see these movements coming into, again, longevity, biohacking, don't die, that seem to be replacing faith with a more of a rational faith in science and medicine, and they can coexist, right? I think I don't see a future where these things are necessarily at odds.
No, I think that, both scenarios are going to exist no matter what. Whatever can happen will happen, especially with AI. You can't put it upon humans to not try. Again, slogan of the 21st century, what humans do. uh, another interesting area to think about is, there's other technologies too that could be even worse purveyors than AI. Not from, actually trying to consciously convince you otherwise, but just, in the tech itself, like reality, for example, augmented reality are going to be really huge factors in the near future in terms of being able to connect people to a smart world or a smart city or IT infrastructure that's kind of built out around you. I think we're heading that direction very, very quickly. The metaverse has been around a while, but augmented, creating a lot of different ways we interact with society. Drones as well. Drones have been, pretty incredible in terms of what you can do, like at mass scale. If you take like 10,000 drones and fly them up in the air and you coordinate them with the right algorithm, you can have a dragon flying through the sky for Chinese New Year. Pretty incredible. Again, technology, you really think about it, you start to ask, could you create a drone Jesus rising out of the water and trick people? Could you create Jesus in virtual reality and give them a really deep religious experience, as much as if you were on a DEITY trip? With augmented reality, could someone hack into your glasses and make you think that you're seeing something that might not actually be there? AI is definitely something of huge concern just because it can potentially be intelligent as we, or maybe beyond that. But there's a lot of technologies that exist today that might actually have more of a immediate impact as well. Love to get your thoughts on that as well, Sam, knowing that you're very much into some of this stuff too.
I mean, I don't want to be like the habitual cynic. I'm actually quite an optimist. I'm balanced with it. So my first
But
reaction with
it could be from an optimistic
from
point
an
of
optimist,
view.
my first reaction with everything is like, this is batshit crazy. Excuse my language, but like, what are we doing here? And then I just go along for the ride, and hopefully we all can ride this wave together. And we gotta blast through it. I think we need momentum at this point. There's no hesitation on my part because I simply don't think that we can afford to hesitate. But okay, so all those things are possible. I saw this is a pretty terrible, not meme, but like someone posted a joking thing on X, and it was a picture of a drone formation of something like a dragon, and they said, I want to take these and go to some undiscovered tribe in the Amazon and mess with them basically, and show that we pretend to be a god. And I was like, this is
That sounds so wrong.
So wrong. I know, as an anthropologist as well, I'm like, oh my goodness, I would probably be right there with them saying, oh my goodness. But you have to think about that. I mean, there are plenty of throughout history accounts of people, especially when settlers arrived to new lands, when people saw ships for the first time, and they were like, what? They didn't even see it. There was no way to perceive what that was because they were not conditioned to know what it would be. And you must imagine that if you've never seen something before, you would think it was some sort of god or devil or curse or omen or whatever. I mean, you think of people seeing an eclipse for the first time, and then entire belief systems form around this. So short answer is yes. I imagine that a number of things will occur. We're seeing this right now in the United States. I'm not well versed on the full narrative of some of these either drones or unidentified objects in New Jersey or things like this. But, of course, people, the first inclination, if they don't know what that is, in my mind, I'm like, are those military drones? That's my head always goes, they're not, like there's an alien. But it's fully within the realm of possibility, that drones or holographic technologies um, could be used to confuse people. As we as interfaces get closer to in or on the body, so virtual reality headsets, or even as simple as keeping earbuds in, you know, you could start hearing things through your earbuds. AI could get in there and be
With
like,
how good spatial audio is today, you know how freaky that would be if
you
you
know,
had a little hey you come from one ear and you turn your head
I
around and
know
there's
I'm giving
um
people hacking advice. It's like, what would I do if I was trying to make someone go crazy? I'd be like schizophrenia AI and be like, hi, this is the voice of God. Take a left here. And I'd be like, what? Um, these are things I don't mean to joke, but from a cybersecurity perspective, and this is so far outside of now the realm of cybersecurity or the realms of cognitive security, so preserving your awareness. I still don't have a name for what we need to call this. It's like pretty much everything. We need to be careful, again, about opportunities to manipulate or confuse people. But perhaps there could be, on the positive side, an increased awareness in part of our reality that we are not yet aware of, in the same way that, like, let's say night vision goggles or some of these tools that might have been used that people perceive spirits or things like this. I'm sure that there will be a period of time where we have an increased awareness, right, of the world or experiences around us, whether that's an increased range of things we can hear or increased perception of subtle energy fields, which we really don't even place a lot of emphasis on at the moment. And maybe there are these technologies can help us, not necessarily in a manipulate you and plant some false beliefs about some, Jesus is talking to me in my head and I saw him in my dreams type thing. But, maybe there are ways to help people reconnect to their faith-based awareness system. And it's different for everyone. Everyone has their own practice, whether we're talking about music. It seems that music is something that is a commonality throughout all human cultures and societies. So there must be something to it. But, beyond that, the rites and rituals that have been developed across all the religious belief systems, there's a point for all of these things. There's a point for why is it that tobacco is used in so many traditions, whether it's, again, monotheistic, polytheistic, spiritual, indigenous rites. There's something to it. Things like incense or smoke or the use of these tools or technologies. And the more that, at least in my research, just like not formal research, but curiosity, you can see across disciplines and belief systems, there are commonalities, maybe not common. There are certain things that are fundamentally incompatible. Myself and my belief system is kind of many would say this is incompatible, but it's a Buddhist spirituality or philosophy. It's probably more of a religious Christianity, Catholicism. I feel like it works. Many would say you should not say that out loud. That doesn't work, but or that you can't pick and choose. But again, I tend to think that if you kind of pull out at a more macro level, there are similarities, and maybe AI or some of these tools can help us to find those and find a common ground between people with different perspectives, or what they're kind of getting at with different rituals.
Yeah, it makes me think of Hollywood a lot. Like, there's been a lot of movies and TV shows around religion for quite a long time, and a lot of them are actually well adopted into different religions to help people, especially children, better understand larger concepts. And yeah, there's little twists and turns there. Obviously, people aren't little pieces of fruit and vegetables like in VeggieTales, but at the same time, it's probably not as dramatic as Hollywood might make out Exodus to be with Christian Bale. But we also, we don't necessarily criticize those things too much, but those also exist and are constantly being remade all the time. But it's just going to end up walking a line of, is there a too far? Is it, just this is the technology of the day and this is how we adapt to religion in modern times? Is it just a new form of media or consuming information? Um, and I think there can be a lot of good done. I think especially with things like virtual reality, I think could be, a real positive for creating, again, these experiences for like the church and for religion and connecting to spirituality. I don't think it's necessarily a complete bad thing. And I think the real line will be, if we can have some type of AGI, some type of intelligence, something that is closer to being able to make a decision or manipulate or convince people of something, then that's when I think we should be concerned. But I really don't think we're there yet. And it's kind of the last thing I think we should touch on is, do you think we can actually create a digital deity, like an AI god? Like, do you think that is actually possible? I mean, we've yet to create, a complete replication of the mind itself. So, this might be an interesting debate because I tend to think probably not.
No, and we shouldn't if we could. I mean, I try to be as impartial as I can be, but like on this, I'm not going to be. Okay, first of all, there are many levels of what we even define as God, the God, or deity, a deity. That is, many people have different belief systems around that, or language they use. Again, monotheistic, polytheistic, completely atheist, or more naturalist religions centered around the natural world and nature. I am curious personally, this is just like a personal endeavor of understanding the plant world, or what
I was just going to lead into that
mushrooms
too.
have to say. So when we started with this thing of the pagan religions and this is Paul Stamets, the mycologist, who, citizen scientist, obsessed with mushrooms guy.
And mycelium, right?
Yeah, mycelium, they call it the wood wide web. 95% of the planet being connected on the original internet, which is the biological internet, the plant world, mycelium being the white structures that direct nutrient, pretty much connect everything. But imagine there is an intelligence and a natural general intelligence there, in terms of the way that carbon and nitrogen moves between trees, or how they're communicating, or how things grow in a forest or ecosystem. I think there's something there, not in terms of a consciousness, but yes, there is a natural general intelligence. And I personally just want to learn from that world first and foremost, whether we call that a god. I don't think that we need to use that language, but there's certainly a natural general intelligence in the world, and we probably would benefit from learning more. And there are a few projects, I don't have the specific name. This is maybe a year or two ago where I heard about them. It was some of the earliest examples of researchers using AI for the natural world. So there's Project SETI, which was translating whale language. And then there were projects here with AI wanting to translate the frequencies of plant communication. So either recording frequencies from plant wave FM and then putting it into a system, or some of these. So I think we should put more energy there into versus like training our existing religious belief systems. And maybe we learn something, and there's an emergent new perspective that can help to augment or support perhaps where some of this original knowledge came from. But it's more of a listening and receiving, right? I think there's a a difference here. You asked the question, should we create a AI or synthetic deity, or will we? We probably will. I'm not saying, I mean, we will. Should we? No, but we will.
I don't even know what that would look like. Yeah, I was just gonna dive into the mycelium stuff too. We're definitely on the same wavelength there.
See, it's the mold that's floating around my house talked to the mycelium down the street, decided to implant the idea.
No, I personally think that if we're just talking about our own perception of what consciousness is, and it's hard because when you think about it, you think it from a biological perspective. It's hard to compare that to a machine or to data or strings of data. There's a really good quote by Alan Turing, who's often credited for creating the first computer before the modern computer itself. And he was asked, about intelligence and being replicated. And he was quoted saying, if we are able to create a machine that appears to have human-like intelligence, it does not really matter whether the machine is actually conscious, because the only definition we have for consciousness is from our own perspective, from being biological, and a machine isn't biological, it's mechanical. And the same thing goes for like force too. What's to say a machine can't think in its own way? What's to say a force can't think in its own way? You see this already proven through mycelium networks with mushrooms. Like they actually have a sense of their surroundings, which is pretty incredible. They have a sense of where to grow, where to spawn. They can share resources. They can connect to other species, other trees, other bushes, other plants, and they can actually be a huge transport system for those other organisms that seem to have a degree of consciousness themselves. Even from a seedling, there's a lot of studies done on how they can actually determine whether or not they're upside down. If you take a seedling and you turn it upside down, it'll still grow right side up. It has a sense of gravity, which is pretty incredible. Is that to say that it's not conscious? I think that's a degree of consciousness right there. Let alone an entire forest ecosystem seeming to be able to communicate with each other, yet not being from the same plantae lineage, is also pretty incredible. And I think you could say, arguably, there's more consciousness in a modern day forest than there is in a machine. But again, a forest is still more or less biological, probably closer than us than a mechanical instrument, a robot, or a set of data. But that doesn't mean that it can't think and it can't derive a sense of consciousness at some point. I think the biggest question, and that Alan Turing once referred to, is how do we measure that? Something that Ray Kurzweil has also talked about. How do we measure consciousness? Because we can only measure it from a human perspective, because as far as we know, for now, humans are the only thing that are really truly conscious, other than other animals that maybe have a degree of self-awareness, a degree of social understanding, or certain characteristics, but can't necessarily reason and think like a human. So yeah, getting to that point is going to be tough, I think, for a machine. And I'll finish my point, but I want to hear what you have to think about that as well, because I know you're kind of gasping for the jump.
No, I'm making facial reaction because I'm like, whoa. Are you done?
Go for it.
Oh my God. I think, and this is just a hunch, that as we go deeper in terms of our technological, mathematical, scientific research into the natural world, which is, science and spirituality, or science and organized religion, it's something that I don't think they are at odds at all. I think attempting to explain the natural world, this world that we're in, is a deeply religious experience. If we're doing that through math and science, it's one language. When we think about the natural world, whether it's the plant, the nature of consciousness and that world, it might just be that we're measuring, as you said, on a different spectrum of what we define as consciousness. And it might just be that there are other forms of it, other dimensions, or perspectives. And I would like to see our efforts placed in mapping or understanding or communicating with, or across these different systems, or perspectives on consciousness. Because if we're able to understand, let's say, what's stored in a mycelial network, and you could almost argue that there could be data stored in that biological system from the dawn of time, before humanity, right? There could be a system of record in there. We just don't know that language. It might be in some sort of chemical processes. It might be in some combination of sound frequencies or music, which is
Shout
where we
out
get
AWA.
yeah, where we get back to the drumming in the pagan religions, with drumming into the forest, to basically record, record their histories, not on paper, not on books, but drumming long wave frequencies to communicate through the forest. That was their belief system. I don't think that sounds totally crazy, but I would love to read that. Do we have a system where we could read what people were writing, proverbially, like through drums from, 1000 BC? I don't know. So again, I think we'll see more research there. And if that leads to an emergence in more complex or even new belief systems, or belief systems that substantiate existing ones, I find that way more interesting and fruitful endeavor than like replacing not what we have, right? But there's a reason certain things persist over time for so long. It's also why our fascination with the stars and the planets and the way that we measure time, and even not just astronomy, but astrology and the relationship to spirituality there. It's a very long standing system, thousands of years. I don't think these things survive over the course of human history if there isn't something to it. But again, I think we'll see maybe a depth of new knowledge or old knowledge, or new perspectives on old knowledge. And we'll probably see, new emergent systems. I don't know if I'd fully trust those. And I don't know if we need new perspectives on interpreting the Bible, for example. We see, I don't know how many denominations, just to use Christianity as an example. This is too provocative for me to even say. Like, I don't know. I don't have an opinion on it, other than it seems like there are a lot, right? And that's a result of many interpretations. Will AI consolidate the interpretations? Will AI further fragment them? So, I don't know. What do you think?
It's tough, because I could try to make the argument either way. I mean, if you look at what are the founding principles of what we consider God to be? We consider God to be omnipresent, like everywhere, all at once. We consider God to be all-knowing, all-powerful. All these things that go way beyond what a human would ever be possible of doing. Someone that could create a universe with a snap of their fingers in a single day, or that might be able to mold from the ground up a human and multiply that, that can create abundance yet take it away all at the same time. Can AI potentially do that? The short kind of answer is yes, but the long-winded answer is no. And it's because you have to really look at, I think if AI can't even be conscious, I don't think it can really be God. It can replicate a lot of things. It can be everywhere at all at once. Sure. It can know nearly everything. Sure. It can do a lot of powerful things, especially if you give it the access. But again, that's where, the limitation, I think, comes in. To be conscious, and a lot of people probably would agree that you have to have a degree of awareness. So if I was blind and I was deaf and I was mute, would I still be conscious? People would say, yeah, you're alive, you're conscious, because you have a system that's working and beating and pumping blood. And But then isn't that the same argument for why a force might be conscious? A force might not be able to, a tree might not be able to look at you, to see you, to touch you, to hear you, all these different things, but it's still a system and it's still working and it's still interacting with its environment in different ways. So a force could be conscious. A machine, potentially, you could make the same argument. It just doesn't have the ability to completely sense its environment. Yet some do. You can build in LiDAR into a machine. You can give a machine the ability to sense smell now. You can give a machine the ability to rationalize to a degree based on preset knowledge. So you can get closer and closer, but it's still, this argument that floats out there. What is consciousness and how do you interpret that? So, I don't even know if we can get a machine to be at the same level as a human in terms of consciousness. Obviously, it'll probably be able to, it already does compute at a higher level. But to act and think and be autonomous, I think will take a lot more time. So I don't know if it can actually, be at the level of what we consider to be God. But again, it's just something that's, I think, up to interpretation. I think the idea with God is that, AI is not even above it. AI is not something that can tear down God, but God can tear down AI. I don't know. It's something that will play out over time, but I don't think that you can replicate a concept that's built to be bigger than something that's materialistic. Because God isn't something that's materialistic. It's something that's, you're not supposed to be able to make it tangible or to grasp like a physical sense. Like it's something that's more ideological and something that's supposed to be more grandiose. I don't think you can take AI to that level, but I do think AI can kind of masquerade, and I think it can, it probably can act more like the devil than it can act like God.
Yeah, you said it. I mean,
So,
I don't want to say which side I would think, but I think if, at least in the stories of the work of the devil, or the idea to divide people or to confuse people or to pull people away from divinity or faith or connection, it probably operates more in that way, quite a trickster. When you were saying all those things, I do think ahead to a moment. I was on a panel a few years ago, and we were discussing, it was at Dell Technologies World, and it was on the interface or convergence of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and immersive realities. So this VR, AR, spatial computing, metaverses, immersive technologies. And we're not quite there yet, though we are. I mean, you and I right now, and anyone who's watching, is immersed in the sense that we've,
I
coming in
think
through
you're
our
going the
voice.
direction I wanted to go next to.
Yes. Oh, good.
It's like the
Good.
Matrix,
Well,
right?
telepathy. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, today we might be able to see that line, but let's fast forward to whenever the moment is that we are more, the interfaces that we use, technological interfaces, are more immersive, whether that's a haptic suit, whether that's, things that we're using to augment our senses, or brain chips to fully immerse us in an augmented or an immersive virtual or extended reality. So something like the movie The Matrix. We could even be in some sort of pod, either living here or on our way to Mars. I don't know what we're doing. In that sense, the way that your reality would be rendered in that essentially game engine, this very high fidelity game engine, what you'd be perceiving, would likely be rendered frame by frame by artificial intelligence. And we're seeing the advancement in spatial computing. So one, mapping the world and documenting that, the physical world, the sensory world, but also being able to produce it frame by frame in real time. Now, with quantum computing, we hypothetically will have the ability to render a photorealistic reality, not just in one dimension, one perspective, but you could theoretically spin up infinite perceived realities, or let's say game worlds, if we're just thinking it's like you're in a video game, infinitely. Now imagine that, imagine you're born 100 years from now, we're not talking today. Maybe it's in our lifetime. We're going to start to see this stuff, but like you're born into this and you're maybe like partially in this world or partially immersed in that. And then you see some sort of all knowing personified being. Maybe it has a name. Maybe its name is Claude, or maybe its name is Grok. I don't know. Let's hope it's not. We have a better name for that. But anyways, we're speaking to it. It's personified. It probably would emulate these things you've just described, like even the stories of creation myths, creation stories across all religions and spiritual traditions. They all have a creation myth, and it would definitely emulate those quite well. Like I spun up I could create a universe in a split second. I can transport and teleport you to that different world in a second. I can destroy everything at once in this world you're seeing, and I can create it all again. Like imagine that.
You've probably watched Rick and Morty. Have you seen the Teenyverse episode?
No, tell me about it.
You haven't seen Teenyverse?
I've only seen one episode of Rick and Morty.
There's this episode of Rick and Morty where they're flying around and they're going to get ice cream. Like that's how the episode starts out. They're going to get ice cream, and then his spaceship breaks down because the battery stops producing electricity. And so he grabs Morty and they go into the battery, and he's like, wait, what are you doing? And then they get inside the battery, and it's like this level down, what's the movie called? It's kind of like Inception, but not like with the dreams, but like think of it like going down into like a universe, but a universe within a universe within a universe. So essentially he built out a universe within his battery for his spaceship. And in that universe, he is viewed as a god because he came down and he gave them electricity and he gave them technology. And so he tricked them into producing electricity that 50% of the electricity they produce actually isn't wasted electricity. Like he told them it goes to power the battery in his car. And but the kicker to that is that civilization also got so smart that they created their own Teenyverse because they needed more power. And so they go a second level down into a second Teenyverse. And that universe created their own way of generating electricity that powers the above universe that also powers his car. And then they go into another level down. It spirals out of control. It's hilarious, but it's kind of the same precedent. Something like that movie Inception, where they go levels down in consciousness when you're in a dream state, or maybe it's something more along the lines of The Matrix, when you go into a simulation, but you don't know you're in a simulation. There's that potentiality, and Elon likes to talk about this a lot too, of simulation theory. If you're able to create a virtual environment that's indistinguishable from reality itself, and we're getting very, very close, what's to say that we're not in one ourselves? You don't remember what happened before you were born. You don't remember what happens after you die, as far as we are aware. Like there's this barrier, this fifth wall, essentially, that we can't see through. And who knows? Like it's a really good argument. And that's not to, cast any shadow of doubt on religion out there, but it's something to think about with technology in terms of maybe, AI tapping into something to purvey a false reality. You don't necessarily know what reality you're in if there's multiple realities, if those realities you can tap into, if, it's a matrix situation, everyone's in a floating vat of water in a pod somewhere. Or if you're hooked up to a machine, something a little bit more subtle, and you're just in this induced dream state for the last 30 years of your life. How do you really know? And it's it's an interesting, I think, kind of thought process to go down. Like, can AI tap into something like that to essentially play God in its own kind of tricky, trickster, devious way? The answer to that is yes, but I don't think we can answer that question, because if that's happening right now, then it's duped us pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it's the turtles all the way down with that one. It's you I mean, that in that scenario, you could also then in every level have different god or gods. So now I want to go on a multi-dimensional anthropological journey to find all the gods of the multiverse. Um, it's possible. Uh, we're experiencing it now, again, to a lesser degree. It's not so much that you're like transported in this Inception or Matrix level, like fully immersive reality, but certainly you can go into different domains, like mini metaverses, mini ideological, perceptual, digital spheres, even within one platform, and feel like you're in a different reality with a different figurehead, with a different belief system. So yeah, the question happens like when we take those networks, and if we were to like fully immerse ourselves in them, what might emerge as deity or deities or god or gods, or belief systems. It's quite crazy to think about. I don't know. I'm intrigued by simulation hypothesis. As
Mhm.
a technologist, it's something that is, it's not out of the realm of possibility in terms of our technological capabilities, either now or very soon. I'm not saying what is in the hands of like the consumer or general public, but in terms of the convergence of the technologies coming together at this moment in human history, certainly intriguing, right? They definitely support not the argument, but support the possibility of something like that being possible. Maybe we'll see it in modern, let's say, warfare or gaming or other types of things, not fully like you're living and confused that you're living in this different reality. But, you do have to fast forward beyond the transition period where people remembered a world before it and people remembered a world after. We probably won't be around for that unless we might, because we might also get put into this world and live forever. Right? What happens then if you're living this digital existence or uploaded consciousness, and now there's no concept of life or death, there's no concept of afterlife, there's no concept of heaven or hell, at least one that um, relates to an afterlife, or if we're talking again like samsara or Buddhist traditions, right? But there's always some sort of like death transition. What happens as the technologies push us towards either digital immortality and consciousness upload, or physical immortality, as others are working on. Does that fundamentally challenge the reason for religious belief systems?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to dive into. It sparks a lot of different lines of thought and curiosity, especially with the whole life and death part of it as well, because it just feels like this fourth wall, fifth wall, whatever you want to call it, that's kind of just like blocking your vision. It's amazing that we can't really see beyond that to really get clear answers. And you don't even have to go virtual to kind of have these interesting thoughts. Like this stuff exists at an atomic level as well. Like there's a lot of great science being done on what happens to particles in particle physics, and it's something that defies our own understanding of what's supposed to be the laws of the universe. But at a certain level, it's completely different. Why is that? Well, things are disappearing and reappearing in other places. Things are acting strangely. They're not, visible, yet they are visible, yet they're flying around, yet they're in a pattern, yet they're in a frequency, yet they're stationary at points in time. Like it's very awkward to comprehend. And, there's a lot of great science being done on things like dark matter and the fact that our universe truly isn't empty. It's actually, largely full of this stuff that we can't measure. So, even in a, realistic sense, without even diving into the virtual aspect of it, like there's potentially other dimensions, realities, levels up and down, you know, whether it's, you know, us in another universe on another planet doing this podcast, except it's about a different topic, or if it's something as small as, you know, being able to interact with matter in a different way. Like, you know, there's a reality to all of it. I'm definitely losing my train of thought going deeper and deeper into this, but
quantum physics is challenging.
It is very challenging because you can be right, but the next second you're just completely wrong.
I think, you know, I share in your sentiments, and it's you know, it's funny when Facebook came out, like I was very young and I'm still the same person. I'm like facetious, and it required that you entered some metadata like your name, your age, birth date, all of this was public, and it was like religion. I think it was still like required. It was a weird thing, and I think I wrote fractal geometry or quantum physics. Like there were two things. I was just joking. In hindsight, it's still pretty true for me in the sense that I think beyond just like understanding the nature of the universe through mathematics or physics or fractalized perspectives, I think we're at a moment in time. And again, I'm not a physicist, but I have respect for this area of research where we might get to a point where classical physics does not does not stand up to newer research, right? And again, times in history where we have new scientific discoveries or disciplines. This usually is heretical from a religious perspective, right? It's like lock that person up or burn them at the stake. It completely changes the worldview and our role in it. And we might be in one of these periods of time. Of course, AI is the first one of a few catalysts of many. But what is coming and what is already underway with quantum computing, which also is big questions around the nature of like it breaks the internet. What does this mean for our reality in the digital world? But quantum physics, as you're describing, the nature of our perceived reality in the material or energetic worlds, or there's something between that that is not yet defined, I think will challenge our notions, our religious belief systems, and our notions of God, right? Because it's such a big thing that cannot even be articulated, or understanding what impact that will have on humanity and human understanding and human belief systems. I, for one, am excited to be alive at a time where we can like contemplate questions this big. A little, I wouldn't say scary. I see this as like a super exciting, but definitely is what leads to people feeling this ungroundedness.
Yeah, I mean, if we have these kinds of questions and, you know, we don't, it creates a degree of what if and confusion, you know, reeling it back to AI, you know, of course, there's an area where maybe it can play quite an impact, you know, whether it's a virtual world, whether it's living in a simulation, whether it's our own confusion with reality and maybe tapping into that. It's very fascinating. So do I think AI is going to be a god? I don't think so. I think that's a whole different level of a ball game that we're asking it to play, but I do think it can, it can be a bit of a trickster. I think it can definitely convince us of one thing or the other. I think it can definitely trick, convince, manipulate us in a bad way. It can also maybe bolster us, maybe educate us, maybe enhance us. Like AI doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing either. And I think it'll obviously be used for both ways. I mean, humans are humans. We're going to develop an AI, and I don't think the AI is just going to go off on a tangent and we're all of a sudden going to live in Terminator 1, 2, and 3, and all of a sudden the machines take over the world. I don't think that's the logical way forward, but, could have a negative impact on the community, sure. Could it pretend like God? Sure. Could it have a degree perceived consciousness? Sure. But it's a very complex and convoluted, I think, question to answer. I think that's my way to approach it. It's short, yeah, long answer, no.
Yeah, it'll certainly be entertaining. You know, I hope we just don't have this perceived supernatural overlord of all the quantum realms that is deciding to spin up different realities like different servers and keeps hard forking us into different realms. That, you know, being like,
You'll
oops,
know there's a problem. You'll know there's a problem if something comes down from the sky and says, hey, what are you doing with the servers? Stop creating those servers.
No, like I messed this. I'm just thinking as like a software engineer myself, right? You maybe someone's like messing with us on production, and it's like, no. So you didn't like roll back. You know, it can have some humor on it. I think they're, at least in like the current conception, right? That we're discussing, and like one universe, one entity. If there's more, or I don't want it to have too much fun, but you know, you do have to think about that too. It's like all of us that are building these systems, or if you build like a game world, or just, I don't know if you played The Sims ever growing up, or any of these types of simulation games.
Yeah, I played Sims. I played a lot of different simulation games. They were alive. I used to play Roll Tycoon.
Yes.
You could buy like a whole theme park. You could, you know, monetize. It was very entrepreneur centric. All the little
I think either Brandon is frozen or I'm receiving. Oh, you were.
Am I unfrozen?
Yeah, I was
Am I still
about to.
frozen?
No.
Better?
Yes.
Okay, there might be a little bit of a lag. I don't know what happened, but our AI overlords are trying to cut us off from talking about their
like,
roller
stop
coaster
talking about
tycoon
Roller
secrets.
Coaster Tycoon. That was our version 1. We knew who would be the best entrepreneur from that game, and we knew who would be the sadistic psychos, not built, you know, in The Sims. I think people.
I was the sadistic psycho overlord of my tycoon theme park, because the Sims would get like, they'd get angry. Like I would build them like a food stand and they were still hungry and they get mad because there's no bathroom. So I'd build a bathroom and then they'd get mad again because there's too long of a line, and they'd start leaving the park and your revenue would go down. Like it was a very frustrating game to play because it was very focused on customer service and kind of like teaching how to appease potential clients or a potential customer, which I get now. But then like as a kid, you get frustrated. And one of the coolest things you could do is you could pick up the NPC and you could do whatever you want. Like you could toss the NPC, you could move it over here. So I'd build out this little pit, this little pit of misery. And I'd take the port.
Goodness.
And every time there was an NPC that got unhappy, I'd take the NPC and drop it in the pit. And then all the angry NPCs were there. So the park was only filled with happy NPCs, and it boosted my revenue. It was very totalitarian ruled roller coaster theme park, but
I don't want to
don't ever come
in
to my theme park.
your universe. That's like, I'm going to be reborn in my next life, and it'll be in Brandon's roller coaster tycoon world.
Don't ever join my Sims game, please.
I played Sim Park, and I just used cheat codes if there were, and just built. It was like national parks with flowers, and I made designs out of them. I never played what like activated it where like people did stuff. I was not interested in that. I was more wanted to do world building. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting what the gaming in simulations, particularly, those are still one of the biggest like sectors of game. I wouldn't even call them games per se, but in terms of like farming simulations,
I was just gonna say that too.
it is. It's one of
People actually find them very soothing. And I can kind of see why. Like, it's like, why don't you go fishing or jump on a tractor yourself? But it's actual work, and like doing it in a virtual environment is just very simple. Like the fishing simulators. There's a really good one. I forgot what it's called, but it's really popular right now. There's a farming simulator that's also popular. There's a cooking chef type simulator where you can be in a kitchen, you can kind of cook recipes. There's a bunch of them now. There's a goat simulator. You can wander around as a goat.
That's cool.
It is kind of cool.
I know, again, we're going to traverse many different experiences and realities. I'm sure we'll be able to simulate pretty much everything, but
so that's the question. If we can simulate pretty much everything and we can play God in our own little universe, you know, who says that something else isn't playing God with us and we're in their universe? That's the provocative question.
That is the question. Those who do believe in God or gods, depending on belief system or religion, right? That the answer is yes.
To me, that's the only way of logically going out. You know, could AI be like a deity at some point? Like, I feel like it would have to be like that kind of a scenario where it's kind of confined us in some kind of way. Because I don't think it can live up again to the biblical belief standard of what God is supposed to be ever, but it can definitely, like, we could be living in one of these realities. It could be the Matrix.
Yeah, that is playing the dogs in the background every time that we have a thing. That is definitely.
I know my neighbors have
it's
dogs,
a glitch.
and they're
no,
loud.
It's a glitch in the Matrix. I think now that you said that, my response to you is like, to who would AI be the deity? But perhaps AI could be a god to other AIs. Like, you know, we've talked about the different perspectives of like humans and having a faith or belief in a creator. If AI is able to generate more AI, like as a right, like it's able to
self-replicate,
kind of self-replicate or exert these like creationary forces within the digital realm, maybe it does emerge for digital, if there are digital consciousness is I'm just thinking out of the box. It could take on a different right, like a different realm, right? We've got like kind of the human, biological, natural, physical.
Well, yeah, you know, some people make that argument too. Like human cloning is something that is starting to be more and more considered, and something that is very, very much rides that ethical boundary of what you should and should not do potentially. But it also raises the question of, should we be doing that? You know, we're kind of playing God when you're doing that. Should we be augmenting, you know, births in that kind of way? Should we be trying to clone a human? Should we be trying to augment our DNA? You know, are things supposed to be a certain way because of nature and we play with things too much and we break it? Or are we meant to tamper with these things because knowledge was allowed for us to have at some point? Like, it's kind of hard to know, like, with some of these things, but it's kind of the same principle. Like, we look at that with humans, and because we're starting to try and play God in certain areas, and then AI, you know, obviously could play God in certain areas. Some of it's up to interpretation, but you see it in many different areas too.
I'd say at least the religious, like the fallen man argument of, like, you know, life or humanity after the fall, is that this would be inevitable in a fallen world. I mean, there are interpretations of, before we ate from the tree of knowledge, we had everything. And then immediately you could say even the start of ancient Sumerian civilization, we were probably meddling with nature or nature with things. I imagine agriculture, right? Critiques of that. I mean, there's of course infinite perspectives on history, human history,
Sure.
depending on the perspective, location, who's telling it. I often love to oversimplify and go on one narrative, but counter narratives of that story where we start with the agrarian revolution and we're able to um, grow food, stop being hunter gatherers, and we create civilization as if this is like some progressive feat that gets us to where we are today on the fast forward version. There are counter narratives to that, depending on a lot of different belief systems, but one of which being like we're meddling, right? Agriculture was meddling, probably forms of gene splicing or GMO, even back then.
I mean, domestication. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of animals that exist simply because we domesticated them to be eaten,
Yeah.
like cows.
Yeah. So, depending on the framing of that, some people see that as technological feats in human progress. And so we go with every, possible um, unforeseen consequence of that decision that inevitably leads to more challenges, that leads to solving those challenges, that leads to progress. And that seems to be the infinite cycle that we're on. Um, but, the counter narrative to that is we wouldn't be doing that if we weren't in, again, this religious perspective, Christian perspective particularly, or at least from Old Testament Bible belief systems. Like, we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't mess up. So and I don't think we need to be in like a perspective of like trying to get back to that. I think we are where we are. We're moving forward with new technologies and now just like a different depth of the same ethical questions. They're always the same questions if you simplify it. Of should we be meddling with human nature? Should we be meddling with life and death, or playing, as they say, playing God? Same story, different characters, different time, different technologies, same questions.
Tomato, tomato, potato, potato. It's all the same
Yeah,
thing in the end.
I think the answer is no, but we will. And so it's not very hard to, I don't like the word predict the future, but history often can be cyclical if we don't break the cycle. I think we have the abilities to do that. If we have this moment, we say, well, we'll take a different fork in the road. And we try and try again. But, I think certain things are inevitabilities. It's not so much like, do I want it to happen this way or not? It doesn't really matter, my opinion on that. But do I see, I think in any circumstance or decision, infinite possible realities of what could happen already have happened and will happen. So all the things we're discussing will happen. It wouldn't be in the zeitgeist as something that we're discussing. And of course, people are already building it. So it's more just what happens next. And that's where futurism gets super fun.
Yeah, it's a matter of time. I mean, if you had a whole planet full of servers and you had a Dyson sphere around the sun to power it, imagine the computational power. Like, it would be beyond what you could even fathom. Probably would feel like you're talking to a god.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, 100 years ago, people I don't think could even fathom the idea of AI because they couldn't fathom the idea of a computer. So in another 100 years, who knows where we'll be? We've come a long way just even in the last 20. We didn't have internet like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, at least like modern day internet that the average person can tap into. Like, things can escalate very quickly. I think technology compiles as well. Maybe we'll come to these circumstances a lot faster than people think, AKA the singularity itself. Seems like we're getting closer and closer, but we'll see what thresholds we break through or don't break through. But it's fun to think about. So can AI be a deity? Can we have digital deities and gods? Maybe, possibly. I'm going to say no for now, but I'm never going to rule out what humans do in the future. Sam, you're probably the same, but I think it's been a fascinating episode to dive into it a little bit, because I think people do have a lot of questions about AI and maybe where we take it, because it seems to be compiling itself very fast. And it does raise those questions like, is AI going to be conscious? Is AI going to be our overlord? Is AI going to be indistinguishable from God or a deity or something that we could look up to? Could it supplant religion, hurt religion? Could it support religion? Maybe take it to new lengths and new feats. Entirely possible as well. So, been a fun episode. That's my final thoughts on it. Any final thoughts from you, Sam, on digital deities?
I think the question isn't so much, will there be digital deities? It's more, will humans create them? And the answer to that is yes. So whether that's right or wrong, according to your own, belief system, it's maybe something we can expect and look out for. But in the meantime, have a bit of openness or kind of a whimsical attitude towards it. So we started this episode discussing AI Jesus, the church that created a hologram and an AI model of Jesus, which definitely has been very provocative for people to interact with. But I think in human history, when we have these moments where we have very provocative questions, that ultimately leads us either deeper into our belief system or, creating new ones. And I think with that, questions like this are an invitation to, kind of deepen a faith as well. And now we have frozen Brandon. So I'll say thank you again.
I think I'm back.
He's back. He keeps going to different
I'm just checking apparently. In on the other
his roller coaster tycoon torture universe, it seems. But
there's a different universe with this podcast, and we're talking about something else. I was just chatting on.
Well, thank you for joining us for What the Future, and we will see you next time with a new topic.
Make comment your thoughts below on the topic as well, and other future topics maybe you want us to dive into. Definitely share all your thoughts, and see you guys on the next episode. Take care, guys. Cheers.